From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers hand the Toronto Argonauts their second loss of the season, 31-21, but it didn't go at all the way we thought it would. The end result may not be a surprise. The way it got there sort of was. We'll go through the game, tell you what we thought of Cameron Dukes and some of the other guys that stepped up and played for the Argonauts, with a few players resting for this evening's game. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about Something in the Water Brewing and a big event that they've got coming up this Friday, pre-game for the October 6th game against the Edmonton Elks. At Something in the Water Brewing in Liberty Village, they're going to be having $10 margarita pizzas from Pico pre-game. And you got to get out there and check it out. You can get some Longboat. You can still pick up the Longboat barrel mug with Colonel Troutman. I've got it here beside me with my Longboat going on here. And of course, you can grab that. You can try all their great beers, but you can also get that $10 margarita pizza from Pico. It's the perfect spot to stop to before the game because it's only steps from BMO Field. So make sure you get down there Friday, October 6th, pre-game before the 150th anniversary game. We got a lot to talk about in the coming week. We'll get into all that in our pre-game walkthrough podcast midweek as we can set you up for what's going to be an epic game and a celebration of 150 years of Argos football. But you can start out your night Friday, October 6th at Something in the Water Brewing. JB, what did you make of this game? To me, it was one of the weirdest games I've seen this season, and we've seen some odd ones. This one was odd from the get-go because it wasn't really what I thought we'd see from Winnipeg, and the Argos were a lot better than I thought they were going to look with a lot of substitutes in.
It was more entertaining than maybe an exhibition might have looked like. Dukes had a terrific first half. They get off to a really good start. I think they caught Winnipeg by surprise. I think Winnipeg kind of expected them to roll over. It was a pretty entertaining game.
I thought I would give Dinwiddie some credit for sticking to his plan, because I think it must have been really tough. His plan to get Cameron Dukes 3 quarters, to get Brian Scott a quarter. This was exactly what happened in Hamilton preseason. It was the exact same formula. Dukes plays 3 quarters, Scott comes in for a quarter, and then Dukes goes out for the last drive to see if he can put together a game-winning touchdown drive. That's pretty much what this was. And it must have been very tempting going to the fourth quarter with the lead. The Argos up in the fourth, and they stayed with their plan, though. They didn't deviate from it. I think that's really important because, as well as I do, coaching, like on the sideline, we don't always make the most rational decisions. Like, you like to think you do, but often I'll be watching game film afterwards and I'm like, why did I get away from my plan? Or, why didn't I go back to this? It was working so well. It's hard to sometimes see the big picture from the sideline, and Dinwiddie stuck with his plan. This was the plan going in, and he stayed with it. So full credit to him for doing that. And in that sense, this was big for the Argos because I think they answered some questions, and I feel pretty comfortable with some of the answers that they came up with. And we'll get into that when we talk about Cam Dukes a little bit. Why do you think Winnipeg was so flat?
Well, I think it's a bit deflating to play an opponent who's not really trying, because then, if you win, it's kind of a no-win situation for Winnipeg. If you win big, they weren't trying at all. If you barely win, then how come you couldn't beat this team? If you lose, then the sky is falling. It really puts Winnipeg into an untenable position. So I think from the player perspective, it's hard to dial up the intensity needed when you feel like it's kind of a no-win situation.
I definitely felt that. It just felt like the error was out, especially when it was almost worse for them when they walked down the field and scored that first touchdown, because then they really felt that. They just drove down the field without any effort at all, seemingly, got a touchdown. They're up 7-0. And then that was it from them for a long time. They didn't score another touchdown till 3 minutes left in the game. It was a few field goals and that was it. And it was just because I think, like you said, they kind of like, oh, okay, well, this seems not even trying. And the thing is, the Argos were trying. It's just not with personnel. The personnel was the key here. They weren't trying to put their best players in the whole game. They were, in fact, doing the opposite. They were trying to get them rest. A.J. Ouellette started the game technically, but he only had 2 touches. He had 1 run, 1 reception, and then Deontay McMahon replaced him in the second half and got most of the snaps in this game because they obviously wanted to take a look at him, evaluate him in different situations. We'll talk about him a bit more later too. And then you look at like the receiving corps, like DeVaris Daniels has 1 reception and then they go away from him. And it was like that across the board. You look at all the players that they know they're going to need to lean on in the playoffs. And they kept them out of harm's way, starting obviously with Chad Kelly, but also including A.J. Ouellette, DeVaris Daniels, and you know the list goes on. So I get what Winnipeg went through. I think for them, it's a good thing they pulled it out. Like, can you imagine if they had lost to Cameron Dukes and Brian Scott, if they had lost at home, coming off a loss and a bye? You said the sky was falling. Like, the sky would have been falling for Winnipeg in that scenario. So for their sake, obviously it was a good thing they didn't lose. But you're right in that it doesn't really feel like a win for them because the Argos kind of treated it like a preseason game.
Yeah, and that's a very frustrating place to be as their opponent.
for sure.
But which, you know, is not the Argos' problem, of course.
Right. And let's just get into that part too, because I don't know if you and I are on the same page on this. And I want to put this, I don't know if we can put it to bed if we're not on the same page, but like, let's discuss this because we didn't really get into it too much in our pregame walkthrough this week. I believe the correct decision was to rest Chad Kelly this week. I don't think there was any other option. I think running him out there would have been foolish, but there's another way to look at it, obviously. So what is that other way?
Well, I agree. I think that it is the right decision, but I wouldn't go so far as to say it's not a decision. You can also make an argument that you want to test yourself against the best. And when you have an opportunity to do that, you should try and do that. I mean, I don't think that side of the argument wins, but I don't think it's not an argument or it's not a point of view that is at least worth considering. So, you know, I come down on your side, but I don't see it as a no-brainer or you know, only one possible answer. I do think there is a legitimate argument for playing everybody who's healthy and to test yourself against the other really good team in the CFL.
The Argos technically had 9 starters out today. I don't think most of them, I was going to say most of them, I don't think all of them would have been able to go if they really wanted to, but I do think most of those guys would have played if it were a playoff game. But guys that are banged up, you know, guys like, and I don't know the extent of everyone's injuries. I'm just basing this on who was able to practice, who was able to go limited, go full, etc. But I have to believe that if this was a playoff game, I think we would have seen Jamal Peters out there. I think you would have seen Isaiah Cage out there. I think you might have seen Sean Oakman, Wynton McManus. They would have been out there too. I think probably Cam Phillips would have been out there. So there's not just Chad Kelly. There's a bunch of guys that if this game mattered, you would have seen out there. And so it was hugely valuable to get a lot of these guys reps, to get Qantas Stiggers even, like a guy he's had playing time, but not on the boundary side. And so that was good to get him in a really tough matchup too, matching up against Kenny Lawler the whole game. And I thought he did very well there.
Yeah, really well.
Yeah, and had a pick as well. Like, I thought he looked fantastic there. And so now you're in a situation where you've got 2 excellent boundary corners and you have no qualms at all about putting either one of them to the field side. I thought that was something that stood out well too. And you got Jonathan Jones reps at linebacker. Although I will say, Wynton McManus was noticeably missing in stopping the run today, because that's something that Winnipeg just took over at the end of the game, and Toronto could not stop Oliveira at the end of the game. And we haven't really seen that when Wynton McManus has been on the field. They're giving up something in the run stop when they've got Jones and Williams out there as opposed to McManus. Let's talk about Cameron Dukes. So what did you see from Cameron Dukes? What was your assessment of him this evening?
Well, I mean, I suppose I should start with honor is due. He played pretty well. I thought that you couldn't ask much more, I think, of a backup. He didn't turn the ball over. He had a really good passing percentage. He was able to run the ball. He was able to earn me some golden fleeces. Yeah. I thought he played fine. I give him his roses, his flowers, because, I might have been a little flippantly harsh on him. I thought he played pretty well. He definitely read the plays. He definitely made the smart decisions and threw it away when it wasn't there. I'm sure the coaches will love his film. I wasn't blown away. I would say there weren't throws that surprised me or reads that, where I was like, wow, whoa, what do we have here? I think he looked like a fine backup.
I agree. And so compare this performance that you saw tonight to what we saw in Chad Kelly's only start last year. You remember that meaningless Montreal game where Chad Kelly came in and went into gunslinger mode and threw that ridiculous touchdown to Brescacin and the other one to Brissett. That very different games given the same opportunity, right?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody thinks, I don't know. Maybe you do, but other than you, I don't think anybody thinks Dukes is a candidate to become the starting quarterback. But he was fine, which is good. I think you hope for fine. The receivers certainly helped him out, some great yards after catch, and he had some nice reads. And I wasn't, Winnipeg probably did not spend much time studying him, because the throws he made, those guys were pretty open. So that's good. He hit the open guys and he ran in a touchdown. Yeah, so I full credit to him. I thought he did exactly what he's paid to do, which is be, a professional quarterback as the backup.
Yeah, and that's what I thought he looked like too. When we saw Chad Kelly last year in that game, even though the Argos didn't win that game either, Chad Kelly looked like, this guy, and we knew that anyway. We were saying that all season long. The right thing to do was to keep Chad Kelly on the bench behind Bethel Thompson, but he was clearly going to be a starter going forward. We knew that before we'd even, just even based on seeing him in camp and in preseason and meaningless football, we knew that. But seeing him do it in that game last year, it showed us. We're oh yeah, there are elite traits here. There are things that are really going to make him special. With Dukes, that's not what I saw, but what I saw, like you said, everything I wanted to see from a backup quarterback, and we didn't know we had those going in. We didn't know that those were things that the Argos were going to be able to count on. We talked about in the pregame walkthrough this week the uncertainty around the backup quarterback situation. We talked about that preseason. We've been talking about this since the season started, and they came into the season with one quarterback who'd had one CFL start, and that was it, and that's Chad Kelly. And so it's not that this issue, it's not that it goes away, because one start is one start. We don't know based on this start that Cam Dukes will be a perfectly fine backup quarterback, but I certainly feel a lot better about it today than I did a few days ago, because he came into a hostile environment in Winnipeg, a sold-out stadium, playing against the second best team in the league, and did not look out of place. He didn't look like he didn't belong out there. He made good reads. He made good throws. He threw the ball away cleverly instead of taking sacks or forcing a ball that shouldn't have been forced. As far as I could tell, the only mistake he made all night was when he tried to lateral it right at the end of the second half to Coxie. I'm not 100% that's what he was trying to do, but I'm 90%.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it certainly looked like it.
I think, what I think happened? I think we've seen this happen before with Americans. There were 4 seconds left on the clock as he was going down. I think in his brain, he's like, I got to get this ball out, because if I go down here, that'll be the end of the half. But of course, in Canadian football, it doesn't matter if the clock goes to zero. As long as you go to ground before that, it's fine. You can let it go down to zero and then kick your field goal. You're not in a rush. And the reason I think that is because even late in the game, the last play of the game, he had them hurry to the line because the clock was ticking down, even though there was still 18 seconds left on the play clock. It wouldn't have mattered. You still get your playoff, right? And I think that's what he was thinking. I don't know. I'd like to talk to him about that, but that's, to me, he's like, I can't go down in bounds here. And so he looked over, saw Coxie there, and just like tried to pitch it over to him. And fortunately, Coxie jumped on the football, and they were able to kick a field goal at the end of the half there. But that was the only mistake where I'm like, ooh, that's not a good play. But other than that, like, is this enough to, like, you've been sort of a skeptic than me. Is this enough to convince you that backup quarterback is fine for Toronto, or do you need more?
Oof. I mean, I have to say I'd like more. Like if Dukes was starting the Eastern Final, would I feel confident? I mean, I don't think that's a knock against Dukes. I think that's probably true of all, most teams and their backup.
Yeah.
So I think in a vacuum, I would like a veteran who has starts to be the backup. I think that's more what this team needs. But if that's not available, I thought he looked fine today.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, I don't think that I would feel great with him getting the start in the East Final, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a scenario where Chad Kelly goes down mid-game. You need someone to pull it out, and I feel comfortable.
He played Winnipeg, or at least a version of Winnipeg, and he threw the ball over 200 yards, and he ran for a touchdown, and so yeah, I think that he has certainly. It's no longer they must get another quarterback. I think it's fine.
And I agree. We need to see more. I think the next time he gets action will be key. There'll be at least one other game that Chad Kelly doesn't play. We've been told that.
And the team will have film on him.
Right. That's the thing. So now you'll take this film, and good film too. They'll have this. The film against Winnipeg will be very helpful for opposing defensive coordinators. I would love to see. Like, I hope Dukes' next game is against a team that really needs to win. And so we know for sure they're taking him seriously. They're taking his film seriously. They will have deconstructed it and put everything they can into it. And I think that's a little different than maybe what we got from Winnipeg. But if he can survive that, even if it's Ottawa, even if it's Hamilton, where there's no more games against Hamilton, we've already gone through all 14 of those. If it's against Ottawa or Saskatchewan, let's say, I would feel very comfortable if he looked very similar in that game than he did tonight. I think at that point I would say, okay, Dukes is fine going forward for sure. But yeah, you want more than one game to make that decision. Let's look at some of the other guys that were kind of being evaluated tonight. Deonta McMahon came in for AJ Ouellette. As I said, AJ only got one carry. McMahon was the only other back that got carries. He had 5, but for only 8 yards, and 6 of those came on one play. This didn't look like the Deonta McMahon we've seen the last couple of weeks. So where was the magic today?
I mean, I think it's probably a combination of things. One, they're certainly not looking to show anything. So, McMahon is kind of a scheme-heavy runner, that you're going to probably do some misdirection. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces. There's going to be more trickery when he's involved. So they probably don't want to show that as well. If you don't have Ouellette as the hammer, the lightning, doesn't, or the thunder, the lightning doesn't work quite as well because you're not reacting to defensive flow, where if Ouellette and they're throwing 3 guys at Ouellette, now you have a setup for a counter or a screen or something quick. I'm sure they're surprised that they didn't come after Dukes more. I bet they thought that they were going to be able to screen more because the Winnipeg was going to come in with their hair on fire looking to chase Dukes all around the field, but didn't happen.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that had to do with forcing him to put a drive together instead of because the risk with blitzing is that he connects with a big play or he slips through it and now can use his legs and get some
Or
yardage
maybe
there.
Winnipeg was like, okay, you don't want to show us anything. We can play the let's not show anything game.
I'm sure they went into this game thinking that same thing because Toronto showed nothing. There were two
Yeah,
plays that I didn't
I
recognize.
didn't think Winnipeg showed very much. I mean,
Yeah,
there was nothing exotic happening out there.
no, I agree, and I think that's it. Like they decided, okay, we got to try and win this game without showing anything. Well, we will if we need to, but they didn't really need to. Even at the end there, like you could have seen play action off Oliveira. He was running so well. I'm sure that would have been there, but they didn't even bother. They just pounded the ball straight ahead because they wanted to try and do it without having to pull something new out of their hat. So yeah, both teams kind of did that. As I said, I think there were two plays
it was like watching two guys shadow box.
yeah, a little bit. It was. Yeah, I don't know. There was a tactic to it, obviously, and I agree with what you said on McMahon. I think DJ Foster was a little bit like this. Remember him from 2 years ago, right? Like
hashtag DJ Foster.
yeah, like because he looked amazing when you could combine him in the backfield. Like he and White together in 2021 were fantastic, but when they put him on his own, he just he couldn't do anything. And
I think McMahon is a complementary piece for sure.
Yeah, and I think they probably saw that today, and he ended up 5 carries for 8 yards, a fumble as well, and that was a pretty costly fumble. It turned immediately into Winnipeg points, and I think that was the first time that they led in the game. They outscored Toronto 15-3 in the fourth quarter. Toronto had the lead going into the fourth, but they had the lead after one, had the lead after two, had the lead after three, and just in the fourth, Winnipeg turned it on, and Toronto didn't really have an answer. So, but that fumble was a pretty big play, in as big a play as it can be in a game that doesn't matter for the Argos. In terms of the other offensive guys, Neeld continues to impress me. Man, I like him after the catch a lot. Not only is he a big target, an easy guy to get a ball to, he's like boxes out defenders so nicely, just uses his body, and he always catches with full extension, so you can't get a hand on it. But he had some nice runs too after the catch.
Yeah, he reminds me of a stupid Blue Bomber wide receiver that they seem to have a million of.
Yeah, he's a little bit like that. Same sort of style.
Yeah, which is great. It's great to have one of those on the Argos.
Yeah, and Brissett, I thought had a really nice game. He ended up so Neil had 4 catches, 58 yards on 5 targets. Brissett, same thing, 4 catches, 4 catches on 5 targets, 33 yards. But yeah, I thought those guys looked really solid. But aside from those two, Duke's had trouble finding everybody else, and I think a lot of that comes from not having the same number of reps with those first team guys. Like you notice the guys that he had the connection with, Neeld and Brissett, those are for the large part second team guys, right? Those guys most of the season have been second team guys. And just like we saw with Chad Kelly where Coxie was his guy, and Coxie and he worked together last year as part of that second team, the same thing happened with Dukes where he didn't really have that chemistry with anyone else the same way. So just, something to think about, but not really a surprise. In terms of the offensive line, no sacks again. The Argos have allowed the fewest number of sacks in the league. I thought we would see that for sure today. What they're so good at is not turning the ball over, getting sacks, and not allowing sacks. Like those are the 3 things that have been at the top, and they are right at the top of the league and have been all year. And again, that was a really nice pocket they had against a good defensive line for Dukes. And he scrambled a little bit. He helped himself out a little bit, but I never felt like he was under siege back there in the pocket. So I thought the offensive line played pretty well, one costly holding penalty aside. Defensively, who stood out for you? Anyone that jumped off the screen to you?
Not particularly. I thought that Mason Pierce, flashed a couple times, which was nice for him. I enjoyed Costigan's last Boy Scout dance, and Hendrick seemed to jump in on that too. So the last Boy Scout dance seems to be catching on, which was good to see.
Is that where it's from? Like for sure, does it just look?
I
It
don't
looks
know.
a lot like it, but is that?
I assume. I mean, unless there's a Scottish, Celtic dance connection to Tommy Costigan.
I don't think so.
Jared Brinkman, I thought it was great to have back.
Yeah, yeah. Brink
Um,
was good to have back, but he needed more relief. Like you can't play that style the whole game. You need to be heavier in the rotation than he was, especially first game back. He was out there a lot in the first half, and I think he wore down a little bit. But that's what it seemed like to me.
yeah, I think it was tough. It's much like Winnipeg. I think it's hard to flash when you're not schemed into when you're basically kind of playing head up ball. It's going to be harder to stop the run. It's harder to get interceptions, all of that. You're just kind of, lining up and playing. So yeah, I mean, not a lot pop, but I thought, they did pretty well against a very good offense.
I thought three guys stood out to me. Well, first of all, Jonathan Jones, it's not a surprise because we know, like, the Argos relied on him heavily at the end of last season. We know what he can do, but I'd kind of forgotten how valuable he can be. And I thought he looked really good at that. I don't think Winnipeg's the best matchup for him, but he's a heck of a football player. Man, he hit Calero so hard on that one blitz. Just knocked him into the next week. And he had a couple plays where he just came in so aggressively. He's just such a physical guy. And he looked every bit the part. He's not Wyndham McManus. And so there was a bit of a drop off, but not that much, not what there would be on almost every other team. You sometimes forget about the depth.
He's a tremendous asset to have as a backup. To have that kind of hammer as a backup is amazing.
And then the other two guys, so Mason Pierce you mentioned, but yeah, he's looked hit and miss a little bit since he's had to take over at halfback. I thought this might have been his best game. He's been, by my eye, a little soft in coverage. Like what I mean by that is he's been giving too much cushion. He's been letting guys catch the ball in front of him and then stepping up to make the play. I felt like he did very well. The only time where he really got caught out was late in the game. I don't remember I think it was Schoen that he was matched up with, and Schoen made a hard cut to the outside, and he ended up in bad position, had to speed turn out of there, and allowed that play to be complete. And I think if he positionally played that a little better, he wouldn't have had to speed turn. He might have been in position to break up that play. But he just, he got beat by a really nice route from one of the best receivers.
That's great. That is a throw. That's a wow throw.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great thing, and it was a great route. Like that, you can't stop that. That route from Schoen, the throw from Caleros, there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah,
but,
I definitely wouldn't trade a quarterback that could make throws like that.
No. Yeah, despite the fact that he's been traded many times, including by the Argonauts. Jamie Harry, also a guy that got picked on quite a lot last week. He had to come in relief. Was it when Jamal Peters went down? Yeah, it was Jamal Peters went down, and Jamie Harry had to come in and play corner. And I thought looked a little bit lost last week. Again, just got taken advantage of again and again and again, seemingly, and tightened it up this week. I thought he played pretty well. He didn't get tested the same way. I thought they would go after him a little bit more. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that wasn't something Winnipeg was interested in testing because they don't believe they'll see him if the two teams meet again. Because they did seem to attack. It's so weird, right? Like they went after, I think they went after Stiggers a lot more than they went after Harry. But I think the reason for that is they're trying to test Stiggers, and they're trying to see, because they know if these two teams meet in the Grey Cup, Stiggers is going to be out there, Harry's not. And so that's my thought on that. But I thought even still, he looked really good defensively.
Yeah, he was step for step with Lawler every time I saw it.
And let's talk about the turnovers. So the pick, first of all, from Stiggers was so good. We haven't seen him do that, like a play like that, since early in the season, where quarterbacks just underestimate his athletic ability. And he dropped back, got so much air, and was able to come down with that pick. I didn't initially think he was down. I thought the refs had blown that play early, but on the replay, I do think that one of the Winnipeg receivers just got a piece of him as he was going to the ground. But that was a sensational highlight of a play for Stiggers. And then being able to punch the ball out, I think it was I think it was Jones that was it Jones or Mechie that delivered that crushing hit on Ouellette, and the ball ended up coming loose and got returned for a pretty big gain.
I think it might have been McFadden.
Yeah, it was. It was. And yeah, he had a great game.
Yeah,
I even
not on
forgot
Ouellette,
about.
though.
What's that?
Did you say on Ouellette?
Oh, yes, I did. I meant to get on Oliveira. I often,
Well,
sometimes
you had most of the facts right on that one.
I had an O, and he's a running back. I do that a lot. I notice like every so often I'll listen back to our pods. I'll say the wrong team name, but like 7 times in a row, and you never once correct me. And this time,
that's because I'm concentrating too much.
yeah, that's right. Listening carefully to everything I'm saying. Just like in this case, although you caught Ouellette, which I'm pretty sure I did say, yes, on Oliveira. But yeah, McFadden had a huge game. That amazing tip. Remember the roll coverage they had? They sent a halfback blitz off the boundary side. Mechie rolled, and Collaros thought he had Dembski streaking down the field, but McFadden was part of that roll. He came over. He almost picked it, but he tipped it, and that would have prevented a long touchdown. But
Although I thought Coach was going to have his head when he took that bench penalty.
I know. That
is. I mean, you want to get in a coach's bad books, take a bench penalty, even in a game that doesn't matter. Oof.
Yeah, no, that wasn't good, and it's unfortunate because it marks one of his best games as an Argonaut.
He did play really well.
Oh, he was great.
That'll probably save him in the end in terms of the size of the doghouse.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, he had a couple of tip passes, pass breakups. He he was all over the place at tea time. But yeah, you can't take that bench penalty at the end, even in a game like this. So no, I thought those guys were good. If going forward, of the guys that weren't in today, and maybe I'll give you my answer first and let you think about this for a second. But of the guys that weren't in today, that didn't dress today, who are probably coming back, who do you feel like Chad Kelly aside, who do you feel like the Argos were missing the most? My answer is Wyndham McManus. Like, just seeing how the game went down today. Obviously, Chad Kelly would be my answer if I was allowed to include him. But aside from that, I really think that this defense, as well as they played tonight, I think it's a whole different defense when Wyndham McManus is in there. Even as well as Jonathan Jones played, that would be the guy that I would choose. Who do you think the Argos missed most tonight?
I think McManus. You look at your guy Winnipeg Ouellette, ran for 290 yards or something, and that was probably the biggest connection. I think that he's a defensive MVP. Obviously, you're going to miss him a lot. But I would also. I would also really look at Oakman. I think Oakman, even if he doesn't get it on the stats, I think he's a guy who like in the secondary, sometimes a guy can not necessarily be great, but he allows everybody else to play the position they're supposed to. It kind of like snaps everything into place. And I think the line works better with Oakman. Even if Oakman doesn't rack up the stats, I think it just puts the rest of the line in a better position because he is such a problem and he requires so much attention. I think it opens things up for the other guys.
The reason I think Oakman's so valuable is because as much as I love Jared Brinkman, I think he's an amazing run stopper, one of the best in the league. Although, today, obviously, Oliveira ran all over them, but it's because he didn't have, he needed a rest. He needed more.
No.
And then, at the end of the game, everyone was just beat. The time of possession was so heavily skewed in favor of the Bombers. They had the ball the whole game. And so that's not the ideal script that you're following. But I think when he and Hendricks are out there together, I think you do lose a bit of the sack potential. When Oakman's out there, I think he frees up guys a little bit better. And so Oakman's not as good a run stopper as Brinkman, but he does allow you to threaten the quarterback. And in the CFL, I would rather threaten the quarterback with sacks than stop the run. To me, that's more important.
And Oakman has, that gene, you want to call it the clutch gene. He has that, when you need, I've had, back when my Patriots were worth watching, they would have Vrabel, you would just knew you knew he was going to come up with a play when you needed it. He just did. He would sack the quarterback, or he would knock down a screen, or whatever. You just knew he would. And Oakman has got that third down. You need a sack. You need a tackle for loss. He when he turns it on, I think he brings that to the line, which is so valuable.
And I think there's two other guys that come to mind when you say that. Like the guys that immediately pop into my head are Jamal Peters, who seems to get a pick at the exact right time every time.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to I know the TSN crew were. I don't know, but I would guess that they were looking forward to really burning down Toronto for taking a beat down instead of playing their starters. But it just shows how talented that roster is. That a B- roster can hold its own with Winnipeg. That's the depth of talent that we've been talking about all season on the roster.
And the other guy I was going to say is Enoch Mwamba, who we haven't seen all season, but he's a guy that had always stepped up in the clutch and did the last time we saw him on the football field in the Grey Cup.
He's more like an honorary Argo.
I know, but wouldn't it be amazing though if they could get him back? I
expect to see him holding the flag at one of those home games. When they introduce him to the fans.
That's right.
Great Cup hero Enoch Mwamba. Remember him, everybody?
He's something. Man, I hope we get to see Enoch again.
Yeah, I assume they're just waiting for the playoffs.
It would be something though if he could step out there. I just don't know. I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can put someone like we talked about that last year with some of the linemen that came back, like Nicastro and stuff. We're like, are they going to put them in? And they didn't ultimately because you can't just throw someone in. It's so. Maybe and that's something we'll probably get a sense of those last couple of weeks of the season. If Enoch's not in there, then it's just probably not happening. So I don't know that. It would be amazing though if he could come back for those last couple of games. Like what a boost that would be. Even though it's a position they don't even need a boost from. It's just he's a different player.
Yeah, bring him in for 10 snaps. Like just bring him in for 10 snaps and blitz him the A gap. Just go bulldoze the A gap 10 times. I mean, that's tons.
Go make a play.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we sign off, last thing, special teams tonight. Javon Leake had an almost where it looked like he might be able to break it. I was
pretty impressed. Actually, you could see the Argo bench was pretty impressed with that kid who ran him down. I didn't think anybody could run Leake down in third gear. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, because he opened it up, and I thought he's gone down the sideline. Like, that's it. And yeah, that I don't even remember who it was. It wasn't a bomber I knew well.
Was it Ouellette?
Yeah, it might have been AJ Ouellette came on the field and made a tackle. But it was a heck of a play. But yeah, he had a couple little opportunities today. The kickoff coverage was a little bit questionable early. We saw Robbie Smith take a really bad angle on that reverse. That was a cool play. Have you ever seen that before? I think it was the opening kickoff. You
mean like the jet sweep toss?
They faked a reverse, and then a guy came behind and actually did the reverse.
Yeah.
And so what was so cool about that, and it's obviously something they saw on film or just wanted to try out, but Robbie Smith, when he saw that it was a fake reverse, it really cut his contain. Now he just chased. And then when they brought the second guy over, there was no one left here, and he ran up the sideline for a pretty big gain.
Yeah, I guess it's nice too, right? I mean, that's you certainly you need a pretty big kick to have the time to do all the shenanigans.
Well, Beatty's like the all-time leader in that, so it's the right team to try it against.
Exactly. That is always the danger with his kicks, that you do run the danger of out kicking the coverage and teams playing games with that.
Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction episode of the X's and Argos podcast. We hope to see you down at Something in the Water Brewing this Friday. It's going to be a huge week all week. There's stuff going on as we get later into the week. Of course, it's the 150th anniversary. The Argos 150 years old. The actual birthday, the date is on October 4th. And the game where all the celebrations will be, or where most of the celebrations will be, is on the 6th, Friday night, 7 o'clock at BMO Field. We hope to see you there. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.